Walter Hayes pressed his palm against the credit reader one more time, hoping the display would somehow change. It didn't. 1 credit. A single, solitary credit remained in his account. He pulled his hand back and stared at the number glowing on the small screen. 1 credit was nothing. It was less than nothing on trading station Theta 9, where everything cost at least 5 credits just to survive another day. Walter had arrived on this frozen outpost 3 months ago with a cargo hold full of dreams and agricultural equipment. The equipment was supposed to be his ticket to wealth. Advanced hydroponic systems calibrated for low-gravity farming. Revolutionary technology that would transform colony worlds. Except nobody told Walter that the equipment was calibrated for 0.6 standard gravity. Most colonies operated at 0.8 or higher. His revolutionary technology was worthless. Completely and utterly worthless. The creditors had come quickly. They took his ship first. Then his remaining cargo. Then everything else he owned except the clothes on his back and the thin jacket that was never designed for cold weather. They left him with 1 credit as a courtesy. 1 credit so he could say he wasn't completely broke. Walter laughed bitterly at the memory. Some courtesy. He walked through the outer market district of Theta 9, his breath making white clouds in the freezing air. The station's environmental controls had been failing for 3 days now. The inner levels where the wealthy lived were still warm and comfortable, but out here in the cheaper sections, the temperature had dropped to near freezing. Most vendors had packed up and moved to warmer areas. Most aliens had retreated to heated shelters. Walter couldn't afford heated shelter. He couldn't afford anything. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. 1 credit might buy him a nutrition bar if he found a generous vendor. Or maybe half a ration pack. That would keep him alive for another day, maybe 2 if he was careful. And then what? He had no answer to that question. The market district was nearly empty now. A few hardy vendors remained, selling thermal gear to the desperate. Walter walked past their stalls without stopping. No point in torturing himself by looking at things he couldn't buy. A thermal coat cost 15 credits. A heating unit cost 30. A sleeping pod for 1 night cost 8 credits minimum. He was going to freeze tonight in the maintenance tunnels. That was just reality. Walter turned a corner near a closed shop and stopped walking. There was someone huddled against the wall. At first, Walter thought it might be a pile of discarded equipment or trash. But then the pile moved slightly, trembling. It was a Kthrex. Walter had seen Kthrex before during his trading days. They were insectoid beings from a tropical world called SK their prime. Beautiful creatures, really, with smooth carapaces that shimmered different colors in warm light. Their bodies were designed for heat and humidity. 6 limbs that moved with elegant precision. Compound eyes that could see spectrums humans couldn't perceive. Antennae that communicated emotion through subtle movements. This Kthrex was old. Very old. Her carapace was dull gray instead of shimmering, cracked in several places like ancient pottery. Her 6 limbs were pulled tight against her body, trembling violently. Her antennae drooped against her head, barely moving at all. She was freezing to death. Walter knew a little about Kthrex culture from his trading days. He knew that widows were treated differently than in human society. When a Kthrex mate died, the widow was expected to quietly fade away. They weren't supposed to be a burden on the family. They weren't supposed to ask for help or resources. The kindest families might provide basic shelter, but many simply left their widows to manage on their own. This widow had been left here to freeze. Walter looked at her for a long moment. She didn't seem aware of his presence. Her compound eyes were half closed. Her breathing was shallow and slow. She probably had a few hours left at most in this temperature. He looked down at his credit chip. 1 credit. His last credit in the entire universe. Walter had choices. Not good choices, but choices. He could buy a nutrition bar and have food for tomorrow. He could save the credit and hope to find some opportunity, some angle, some way to turn 1 credit into 2. He could at least have something instead of nothing. Or he could help her. The logical choice was obvious. Walter needed that credit more than this alien did. She was old. She was dying anyway according to her own culture's expectations. He was young enough to still have a future if he could just survive a few more days. Saving himself made sense. Keeping that credit made sense. Walter walked toward the nearest vendor still operating in the cold. It was a Dulverian running a small stall of miscellaneous items. The Dulverian's eye stalks swiveled toward Walter as he approached. "Help you," the vendor gurgled. "Thermal blankets," Walter said. "How much?" "Cheap ones are 5 credits. Premium models are 12 credits. Top quality is 20. Walter felt his heart sink. Of course. Nothing was ever 1 credit. What can I get for 1 credit? The Dulverian made a sound like water going down a drain. Laughter probably. 1 credit? Human, that's nothing. That's less than nothing. I know. But it's what I have. Is there anything? The vendor was quiet for a moment. Then one eye stalk bent down to look under the counter. Got an old emergency blanket back here. Standard issue for escape pods. Thin material. Probably has a hole or two. Is garbage really? I was going to throw it out. How much? For that piece of trash? 1 credit. You want it? Yes. The transaction took seconds. The Dulverian handed over a crinkly metallic blanket that weighed almost nothing. It was thin enough to see through in places. There was indeed a small hole near one corner. It was designed for short-term emergency use only, maybe a few hours at most. Not a permanent solution to anything. But it was better than nothing. Walter walked back to the Cthrek's widow. She still hadn't moved. He knelt down beside her, his knees cracking in the cold. Up close, he could see frost forming on her carapace. Her antennae were completely still now. Gently, carefully, Walter draped the thin emergency blanket over her body. He tucked it around her trembling limbs, trying to cover as much of her as possible. The blanket was barely large enough, but he made it work. Her compound eyes suddenly snapped fully open. Her antennae shot upward in surprise. All 6 limbs twitched. Walter stood up. He'd done what he could. Time to find somewhere to sleep before he froze too. Wait, came a voice. It was mechanical and clicking, coming from a small translation device on her collar. Why? Walter paused. He didn't turn around. Because you're cold. Because I could help. That's enough reason, isn't it? He started walking again, heading toward the maintenance tunnels on the far side of the district. He didn't look back. He didn't expect thanks. He certainly didn't expect anything in return. He'd just spent his last credit on a complete stranger from a species that didn't even value their own elderly. But it had been the right thing to do. Walter knew that much. Even if it meant he'd freeze tonight. Even if it meant he had nothing left. Some things mattered more than credits. Behind him, Clisha clutched the thin blanket with all 6 limbs. The material was cheap and inadequate, but it was warmer than nothing. It was warmth she didn't deserve according to her culture. Warmth freely given by an alien who had every reason to save himself instead. Her antennae quivered with emotion her species had no name for. In 73 cycles of life, in all her years as a successful merchant's mate and then as a forgotten widow, no being had ever shown her such kindness. No one had ever sacrificed anything for her. She watched the human disappear into the shadows between the buildings. Then her limbs moved quickly, activating her communicator with trembling fingers. There were clan members who might still listen to a widow's voice. Not many, but some. And they needed to know about this human. They needed to know what he had done. Because Clisha had not survived 73 cycles by being foolish. She recognized opportunity when she saw it. And she recognized something even more rare. Genuine compassion that demanded repayment. The human had spent his last credit on her. She would make certain that credit changed both their lives. Walter couldn't feel his fingers anymore. That was the first thing he noticed when consciousness slowly returned. The second thing was that he wasn't in the maintenance tunnels where he'd fallen asleep. The third thing was the clicking sounds all around him. His eyes opened with difficulty. The lids felt frozen. Everything was blurry at first, then gradually came into focus. He was lying on something soft. A sleeping mat of some kind. The room was warm. Blessedly, wonderfully warm. And there were Cthreks everywhere. 6 of them stood in a circle around him, their antennae waving in what looked like agitated conversation. Their mandibles clicked rapidly, creating a sound like dozens of insects all talking at once. Walter tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His head spun and his muscles screamed in protest. Easy, human, came a translated voice. One of the Cthreks stepped closer. You were nearly frozen dead. Your body temperature was critically low when we found you. Walter's mind was foggy and slow. Found me? How did you find me? Clisha sent us, another Cthrek said. This one sounded irritated. She insisted we search the maintenance tunnels for you. She insisted we bring you here. She would not stop clicking about it until we agreed. Clisha. Walter's memory was coming back in pieces. The old widow. The blanket. His last credit. The widow you wasted resources on, the irritated Cthreks continued. We do not understand why you did this thing. Widows are not valuable. They consume resources without producing. This is known. Why would you sacrifice your last credit for one who is useless? Cortec, enough. The first Cthreks who'd spoken cut him off sharply. The human is our guest. Clichat invoked old hospitality laws. We will not insult him while he recovers in our dwelling. Walter managed to sit up slowly this time. The room spun less. He was in what looked like a communal living space. Simple but clean. Sleeping mats lined the walls. Heating units hummed in the corners, filling the space with warmth. There were perhaps a dozen Kthrex in the large room, all watching him with their compound eyes. "Where is Clichat?" Walter asked. "Here." The voice came from behind the group. The Kthrex parted and the old widow shuffled forward, still wrapped in the thin emergency blanket Walter had given her. She moved slowly, her cracked carapace making soft scraping sounds. But she was alive. She'd survived the night. "You saved my life, human Walter Hayes," she said through her translator. "Kthrex law is ancient and clear. Life debt must be honored. My clan will give you shelter and sustenance until you are recovered." The one called Cortex Antennae twitched in obvious displeasure, but he said nothing. Walter shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I just gave you a blanket. Anyone would have done the same." Every Kthrex in the room made a clicking sound simultaneously. Laughter, Walter realized. They were all laughing. "No," Clichat said quietly. "Anyone would not have done the same. My own clan left me in the cold. You had nothing, yet you gave everything. This is not Kthrex behavior. This is not logical behavior. This is something else." One of the younger Kthrex suddenly moved closer. He was smaller than the others, his carapace still bright with youth. "I am Preston," he said. "Clichat is my great-aunt. I want to understand. Why do humans help those who are old? Those who cannot work anymore?" Walter was still weak and confused, but something about the young Kthreks's genuine curiosity made him want to answer. "Because age brings wisdom. Because our elders have experience we need. Because there's still people who matter whether they can work or not." Preston's antennae quivered with fascination. "But this is inefficient. Resources are limited. Why waste them on those who cannot contribute?" "It's not waste," Walter said slowly, trying to find the right words. "Old people have lived long lives. They've made mistakes and learned from them. They've seen things we haven't seen. When I was young, my grandfather taught me everything about trading. Not from books. From 50 years of actual experience. That knowledge was worth more than any cargo I ever carried." "Your grandfather was valued?" Preston asked. "Of course. We took care of him when he got too old to work. He lived with my family until he died. That's what families do." The clicking sound started again, but quieter this time. The Kthrex were discussing this among themselves in their own language. Walter caught Clichat watching him with what might have been amusement in the tilt of her antennae. "Families discard their old among Kthrex," Preston said. "This has always been our way. But you are saying humans do the opposite? You keep your old?" "Most of us do, yes." "Fascinating," Preston clicked. "Completely illogical, but fascinating." Cortex made an angry chittering sound. "Enough philosophy. The human will eat and rest. Then he will leave. We have honored Clichat's life debt. We owe nothing more." "Actually," Clichat said, her voice cutting through the room with unexpected authority, "I wish to discuss something with Walter Hayes. In private." The clan members exchanged looks. Cortex antennae flattened against his head in clear disapproval. But slowly they filed out of the room, leaving only Walter, Clichat, and young Preston, who refused to leave despite several pointed clicks from his elders. Clichat shuffled closer and lowered herself onto a mat near Walter. "I was not always a useless widow," she began. "Before my mate died, I was a master textile merchant. For 40 cycles, I worked with fabrics from 17 different worlds. I knew every weaving technique, every material, every market trend. I made my family wealthy." Walter listened, still not sure where this was going. "When my mate died, all that knowledge became worthless," Clichat continued. "I became worthless. The family took the business. They took the wealth. They gave me basic shelter and expected me to fade quietly. This is our way." "That's not right," Walter said. "No," Clichat agreed. "It is not right. But it is our way. Until you human. Until you showed me that different ways exist." She reached out with one trembling limb and touched the thin emergency blanket still wrapped around her. "This blanket is nearly worthless. It has holes. It is thin. It will not last more than a few days. But it represented everything you had. You gave everything for a stranger. For someone your culture does not even consider useless." Preston leaned forward, his young antennae quivering with interest. "I have been thinking all night," Clichat said. "This station is freezing. The environmental controls will not be fixed for weeks, perhaps months. Everyone needs thermal protection. And I know textiles better than anyone alive on this station. Walter's tired mind was starting to understand. You want to make thermal gear? I want to be useful again, Cliche corrected. But I am old and my clan will not support a widow's business venture. I have knowledge but no resources, no contacts anymore, no way to act on what I know. And I have trading experience but no credits and no inventory, Walter said slowly. Yes, Cliche clicked. Separately we are both useless. You are a failed trader with nothing. I am a forgotten widow with forbidden knowledge. But together? Preston suddenly made an excited chittering sound. Together you could actually build something. Aunt Cliche knows textiles and you know trading. This could work. Your clan will never agree to this, Walter said. They barely wanted to let me stay here. They think you're supposed to just fade away quietly. My clan thinks many foolish things, Cliche said, and Walter could hear the steel in her translated voice. They thought leaving me to freeze was acceptable. They thought your kindness was wasteful. They have been wrong before. They are wrong now. She fixed her compound eyes on Walter. You spent your last credit on someone everyone said was worthless. Let me spend my last remaining value on someone everyone says is finished. Perhaps we can prove them all wrong. Walter looked at the old Cthrex widow, then at young Preston whose antennae were practically vibrating with excitement, then back at Cliche. He was a failed trader with 1 credit to his name. She was a discarded widow with forbidden knowledge. It was the worst business partnership imaginable. But it was also the only chance either of them had. All right, Walter said. Let's try. Cliche's antennae lifted higher than Walter had seen them move before. Behind her, Preston made a sound that was definitely joy. In the hallway outside, Cortec and the other clan members clicked their disapproval. But none of them noticed the small smile on Cliche's mandibles, or the calculating look in her ancient compound eyes. She had not survived 73 cycles by being foolish. And she had not forgotten how to build something from nothing. The human had given her a chance. Now she would give them both a future. The first challenge was materials. Walter sat on the floor of the clan's communal dwelling with Cliche and Preston, trying to figure out how to start a business with absolutely no resources. We need silk thread, Cliche explained, her antennae moving in thoughtful patterns. Cthrex silk is produced naturally by our people. It is strong and flexible. It holds heat well when woven properly. But raw silk costs credits we do not have. Preston clicked thoughtfully. My cousin works in the waste processing sector. Sometimes damaged silk shipments are thrown away. Silk that has minor flaws or discoloration. It cannot be sold at full price, so merchants discard it rather than lose profit. Walter looked up. Damaged silk would still work for insulation, wouldn't it? Yes, Cliche said. The flaws would not matter if the silk is layered inside thermal wraps where no one can see it. This could work. Preston left immediately to talk to his cousin. He returned 3 hours later with 2 large bundles of silk thread. The colors were uneven and some threads had knots, but Cliche examined the material with her experienced eyes and declared it perfect for their purposes. Now we need outer fabric, Walter said. Something durable that can protect the silk layers. There is a human merchant on level 7, Cliche said. He sells cheap synthetic fabrics. But he will want credits. Walter thought for a moment. Let me talk to him. Human to human. Maybe I can work something out. The merchant's name was Gary. He was a tired-looking man in his 50s who ran a small shop selling low-grade materials. Walter explained their situation honestly. No credits but a genuine business idea. They needed fabric on credit with payment after their first sales. Gary laughed at first. Then he saw Walter wasn't joking. You want me to give you free fabric so you can start a business with a Cthrex widow? Kid, that's the most ridiculous thing I've heard all year. I know how it sounds, Walter said. But think about it. This station is freezing. Everyone needs thermal gear. The stuff being sold now is expensive and impersonal. We can offer something better at a fair price with actual customer service. With what experience? She was a master textile merchant for 40 years. I've been trading across 6 systems. We know what we're doing. Gary studied Walter for a long moment. You spent your last credit on that widow, didn't you? I heard about that. Everyone's been talking about the crazy human who bought a blanket for a dying Cthrex. Walter nodded. That was either the dumbest thing I've ever heard or the smartest, Gary said. I haven't decided which yet. He sighed. All right. I'll give you 20 meters of synthetic fabric. You pay me back double when you make sales. And if you fail, you work off the debt in my warehouse. Deal? Deal. They shook hands. Walter walked out with fabric under his arm, hardly believing it had worked. Back at the dwelling, Cliche examined the synthetic material with approval. This will work well. Strong enough for outer layers. Cheap enough that we can price our products fairly. Her antennae twitched with what Walter was learning meant excitement. Now we begin. The work started immediately. Cliche's 6 limbs moved with precision Walter had never seen before. Despite her age and cracked carapace, her fingers worked the silk with absolute mastery. She showed Preston and Walter the traditional Cthrex weaving technique, a complex pattern that created air pockets for insulation while keeping the material strong. The key is layering, she explained. Silk on the inside for warmth. Air pockets in the middle for insulation. Synthetic fabric on the outside for protection. Like your human sandwich. Walter smiled. You mean sandwich? Yes. They worked for 16 hours straight on the first prototype. A simple thermal wrap designed to fit multiple species. Cliche insisted on adjustable straps that could accommodate different body types. Walter suggested reinforced edges to prevent tearing. Preston added a small pocket for storing credit chips or identification. When they finished, they had one thermal wrap. It looked crude and handmade, nothing like the sleek manufactured products sold in the expensive shops. But when Walter tried it on, the warmth was immediate and real. It works, he said, genuinely surprised. Of course it works, Cliche clicked. I have been doing this for 40 years. Did you think I forgot everything? The next challenge was selling. They had no shop, no advertising, nothing. Just one thermal wrap and hope. Walter set up a small display near the market district where he'd first found Cliche. He laid the thermal wrap on a crate and stood beside it, calling out to passers-by. Thermal wrap. Custom fit. Fair price. Handmade quality. Most people walked past without looking. A few glanced but kept moving. Hours passed with no interest. Then a Centaurian female stopped. She was shivering despite wearing 2 jackets. How much? She asked. Walter hadn't even discussed pricing with Cliche. He made a quick calculation in his head. Materials, labor, enough profit to buy more supplies. 15 credits, he said. The shop on level 5 sells them for 12, she pointed out. True, Walter said. But theirs are mass-produced. One size fits most. If it doesn't fit right, too bad. This one? He held up their wrap. We adjust it specifically for you. If anything goes wrong, you bring it back and we fix it free. Forever. And it's made with real Cthrex silk, not synthetic substitutes. She hesitated. Cthrex silk? Really? Really? Made by a Cthrex master weaver with 40 years experience. Let me try it. Walter helped her put on the wrap. She was shorter than he was, so the straps needed adjusting. He tightened them to fit her frame perfectly. She stood there for a moment, then her eyes widened. This is incredibly warm, she said. And it actually fits me properly. 15 credits, Walter reminded her. With lifetime repairs. She paid without arguing. 15 credits. Their first sale. Their first profit. Walter ran back to the dwelling with the credits clutched in his hand. Cliche and Preston were already working on 3 more wraps. We sold it. Walter shouted. 15 credits. Preston made an excited clicking sound. Even Cliche's antennae lifted in what might have been satisfaction. We make more, she said simply. Many more. Word began to spread in strange ways. The Centaurian woman told her friends. Those friends told others. Within 3 days, Walter had sold 8 thermal wraps. Within a week, they had a waiting list. Other clan members began to notice. Cortex still disapproved, but even he couldn't argue with the credits flowing in. 2 younger Cthrex, a male named Sikral and a female named Teshka, approached Cliche asking if they could help with production. They were both unemployed and desperate for work. Cliche looked at Walter. Can we afford to pay them? Walter did the math. If we hire them and increase production, we can fulfill the waiting list faster. More products sold means more profit. Yes, we can afford it. Sikral and Teshka joined the team. Cliche taught them her techniques with patience and precision. Preston handled customer measurements and adjustments. Walter managed sales and kept track of credits and supplies. They worked out of the communal dwelling for 2 more weeks. Then Walter found a small workshop space available for rent. 50 credits per month. It was expensive, but they were making enough now to afford it. The day they moved into the workshop, Walter stood in the empty space and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real genuine hope. Cliche shuffled around the workshop, examining every corner with her experienced eyes. This will do, she said. We can fit 4 workstations here. Maybe 5. We can increase production significantly. Preston was already measuring spaces for equipment. Sikral and Teshka were discussing supply storage. Walter watched them all working together and realized something remarkable had happened. They weren't just a business anymore. They were a team. A family almost. And it had all started with 1 credit and 1 act of kindness in the freezing cold. What are you thinking about? Clisha asked, shuffling up beside him. About how impossible this all seemed 3 weeks ago, Walter admitted. Clisha's antennae moved in what Walter now recognized as amusement. Nothing is impossible, Walter Hayes. Some things just require stubbornness and the willingness to prove everyone wrong. Outside the workshop, other vendors were starting to notice the small operation. Some were curious. Some were dismissive. And one in particular, a wealthy Kthrex merchant named Vashrek, watched with narrowed compound eyes and growing irritation. The human-widow partnership was succeeding. That should not be possible. Widows were useless. Failed traders were worthless. This violated everything Vashrek understood about natural order. Something would have to be done about it. But inside the workshop, Walter and his unlikely team worked late into the night, unaware of the watching eyes. They had thermal wraps to make and customers to serve. They had a future to build, 1 stitch at a time. The trouble started on a morning that had begun like any other. Walter arrived at the workshop to find 3 Kthrex clan elders waiting outside. Their antennae were rigid with disapproval, their postures formal and cold. Cortex stood among them looking vindicated. "We need to speak with you, human Walter Hayes," the eldest said. His name was Morthek, and his carapace was nearly white with age. "It concerns Clisha." Walter unlocked the workshop door. "What about her?" "She must step back from this business," Morthek stated flatly. "Immediately." Walter stopped moving. "What? Why?" "It is improper," another elder explained. "A widow running a business. A widow in a position of authority. This violates our traditions. It brings shame to the clan." "Shame?" Walter felt anger rising in his chest. "Your business is successful because of her. Every technique we use, every quality standard we maintain, that's all Clisha. Without her, there is no business." "Then you will close the business," Morthek said. "Or you will find another Kthrex to provide the expertise. Clisha will retire properly as a widow should. We have already made arrangements for her to live quietly in the clan dwelling. She will be cared for. She will be comfortable. But she will stop this unseemly public display." "No," Walter said simply. The elders' antennae all twitched in surprise. "No," Morthek repeated. "Clisha is my partner. Equal partner. I don't make decisions about this business without her. If she wants to step back, that's her choice. But I won't force her out just because you're embarrassed that a widow is successful." "You do not understand our culture," Cortec interjected. "This is not how things are done." "Then maybe it's time things were done differently," Walter shot back. The argument was still going when Clisha arrived with Preston. She took one look at the gathering and her antennae flattened against her head. "I see," she said quietly. "The elders have come to put me in my place." "Clisha, you must understand," Morthek began. "This is for the good of the clan. Your success makes others uncomfortable. There is talk. Questions about why a widow is allowed such freedom. It reflects poorly on all of us." "Let them talk," Clisha said, and Walter heard steel in her voice. "I have spent 10 years being quiet. 10 years fading away as expected. I am done fading." "Aunt Clisha," Cortex started. "No," she cut him off. "You left me to freeze in the cold. You called me useless. This human, this stranger, saved my life when my own family would not. And now that I am useful again, now that I bring honor instead of shame, you want to take it away? I refuse." The elders clicked among themselves in agitated conversation. Finally Morthek spoke. "Then you leave us no choice. The clan formally distances itself from your business. Any failure will be yours alone. Any shame will be yours alone. We will not support you." "You never did," Clisha replied calmly. "Nothing changes." The elders left, their disapproval hanging in the air like smoke. Preston's antennae drooped with sadness. But Clisha simply walked into the workshop and began preparing for the day's work as if nothing had happened. Walter followed her inside. "Are you all right?" "I am free," she said. "That is better than all right." The second confrontation came 3 days later, and it was much more public. Walter was in the market district taking custom measurements for a Delvarian customer when he heard loud clicking sounds. A crowd was gathering nearby. He finished the measurements quickly and went to investigate. In the center of the crowd stood Vashrek. He was a large Kthrex, well-fed and wealthy, his carapace polished to a high shine. Expensive robes marked him as a successful merchant, and he was speaking loudly to anyone who would listen. A widow and a failed human, Vashrek announced. This is what passes for business on Theta 9 now? How desperate we have become. Walter pushed through the crowd. You have something to say to me, say it directly. Vashrek's antennae angled toward Walter with obvious disdain. Ah, the human charity worker. Tell me, how does it feel to build a business on pity? You saved a dying widow and now you parade her around like a trophy. Look how kind I am, you say. Look how I help the worthless. Clisha isn't worthless, Walter said evenly. She's the best textile expert on this station. She is a relic, Vashrek countered. Her techniques are outdated. Her knowledge is ancient history. You keep her involved because it makes you feel noble, not because she adds value. Everyone knows this. She is your charity case, nothing more. The crowd murmured. Some clicked in agreement. Others seemed uncertain. Walter felt his hands clenching into fists. He forced them to relax. Getting angry wouldn't help. Then an idea came to him. A risky idea but possibly brilliant. You think her work is outdated? Walter asked loudly, making sure the whole crowd could hear. Prove it. Competition. You and your modern techniques against Clisha and her ancient knowledge. Station administration just posted a contract for thermal uniforms for the security force. 200 units. Major contract. Let's both submit designs. Whoever wins gets the contract. Loser admits they were wrong. Publicly. Vashrek's antennae quivered with surprise, then amusement. You challenge me to a design competition? Human, I have been crafting premium textiles for 30 years. I have contracts with 5 major stations. You have a widow and a workshop you have owned for less than a month. Scared? Walter asked simply. The crowd made clicking sounds. Laughter mostly. But also interest. This was entertainment. Vashrek's antennae flattened in anger. Fine. 1 week from today. We both present our designs to Station Administrator Chin. She decides the winner. And when I win, you will publicly admit that your widow is indeed worthless and this entire venture is built on human sentimentality rather than actual skill. And when we win, Walter said, you will publicly apologize to Clisha for calling her worthless. Agreed. Vashrek turned and walked away, his expensive robes swishing. The crowd dispersed, already spreading word of the challenge. Walter stood alone in the market district, suddenly realizing what he had just done. He had bet their entire reputation on a design competition. Against one of the most successful merchants on the station. With only 1 week to prepare. He walked back to the workshop slowly, trying to figure out how to explain this to Clisha. She was waiting when he arrived. Preston must have run ahead to tell her. She sat at her workstation, her antennae completely still. I heard, she said quietly. You challenged Vashrek. I'm sorry, Walter began. I got angry and You defended my honor, Clisha interrupted. No one has done that in 10 years. Not even my own family. She looked up at him with her compound eyes. Do you truly believe we can win? Honestly? I don't know. He has more experience with modern production. Better equipment. More resources. But we have something he doesn't. What is that? We actually care about the people who will wear our designs. Every thermal wrap we made it thinking about the person who would use it. We made it to keep them warm, to fit them properly, to last a long time. Vashrek makes products to make money. There's a difference. Clisha's antennae lifted slightly. You understand more than I thought, human. Yes, there is a difference. And perhaps that difference will matter. They worked for 7 days straight. Clisha taught Walter the meditative patience of true Kthrex weaving, showing him how to clear his mind and let his fingers work from instinct rather than thought. Walter shared human persistence, the stubborn refusal to quit even when exhausted, even when every muscle ached. Preston worked alongside them, his young energy keeping them going during the long nights. Sikral and Teshka helped prepare materials and test prototypes. The design they created was not flashy. It was not made from expensive materials. But every stitch was placed with purpose. Every layer served a function. The fit was adjustable for 17 different body types. The repair points were reinforced and accessible. They included a lifetime repair guarantee and custom sizing at no extra cost. On the day of presentation, Walter and Clisha carried their prototype to the administration building. Vashrek was already there, his design displayed prominently. It was beautiful. Sleek, modern, perfectly manufactured. The materials were clearly expensive. The construction was flawless. Station Administrator Chin examined both designs carefully. She was a middle-aged human woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She tried on Vashrek's uniform first. It fit well. It looked professional. She nodded approvingly. Then she tried on Walter and Cliché's design. She moved around in it, testing the fit. She examined the seams. She read the documentation about repairs and customization. Vashrek's design is technically superior, she finally said. Better materials. More sophisticated construction. It would make our security force look very professional. Walter's heart sank. However, Administrator Chin continued, his design comes in 5 sizes. Standard sizing. If it doesn't fit, too bad. No repairs included. No customization. It's a product, not a service. She held up Walter and Cliché's design. This is adjustable. This includes lifetime repairs. This was made by people who actually thought about the officers who would wear it every day for hours at a time. This was made with care. She looked at both merchants. I'm choosing the Human Widow partnership. Not because their design is technically better, but because they treat security officers like people instead of inventory. That matters. The small crowd that had gathered erupted in clicking and conversation. Vashrek's antennae flattened in shock and rage. But the decision was final. Cliché stood beside Walter, her old carapace somehow seeming brighter. Preston was clicking with pure joy. Even some of the clan elders who had come to watch looked surprised and perhaps slightly impressed. Vashrek approached slowly. His antennae quivered with barely controlled anger. I apologize, he forced out. To Cliché. You are not worthless. Your skills are not outdated. I was wrong. He turned and left quickly, unwilling to endure further humiliation. Administrator Chin shook Walter's hand and touched Cliché's limb gently. Get me 200 units within 2 months. And congratulations. You both earned this. Outside, the clan elders waited. Morthek stepped forward, his ancient antennae moving in what might have been respect. Cliché, he said formally. The clan has been reconsidering our position. Perhaps we were hasty. Perhaps widow customs are due for examination. Cliché said nothing for a long moment. Then, perhaps they are. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Walter and Cliché walked back to their workshop together, partners in victory, ready to build 200 thermal uniforms and prove once again that kindness and quality could win against flash and arrogance. 6 months had passed since the design competition, and the workshop had grown beyond anything Walter could have imagined. What had started as a small space with 4 workstations now occupied an entire level of the station. 15 Kthrex worked the looms and cutting tables, their antennae waving in coordinated rhythm as they produced thermal gear that had become famous across 3 sectors. Walter walked through the production floor, checking quality and greeting workers. 5 of the 15 employees were widows. Former useless members of society who now earned their own credits and commanded respect for their skills. Cliché had personally recruited each one, teaching them techniques she had perfected over decades. The security uniform contract had been just the beginning. After that came orders from mining operations, exploration teams, and even luxury cruise ships that wanted premium cold weather gear for their passengers. The Theta Partnership, as they had officially named the business, had waiting lists extending months into the future. Preston managed the customer service division now, his youthful energy perfect for handling the constant flow of inquiries and custom orders. Sikral oversaw production schedules. Teshka handled supply procurement. And Cliché remained the master weaver, the heart of the operation, teaching and guiding and ensuring every product met her exacting standards. Walter's personal quarters had improved significantly. He could afford actual furniture now instead of sleeping on a mat. He could buy real food instead of nutrition paste. He had credits in his account, real credits, more than he had ever possessed during his failed trading days. But the biggest change was not financial. The biggest change was respect. The Kthrex clan had formally held a ceremony 3 months ago, something Walter still had trouble fully understanding. The elders, including Morthek, had gathered in traditional robes and publicly granted Cliché a title that had never been given to a widow before, Elder Voice. It meant she could speak in clan councils. It meant her opinions carried weight. It meant she was valued not despite being a widow, but as a full member of Kthrex society with wisdom worth hearing. Morthek had personally apologized during the ceremony. We abandoned you when we should have honored you, he had said, his antennae low in a gesture of shame. We forgot that age brings wisdom regardless of mate status. We were wrong. The clan asks your forgiveness. Clisha had accepted with grace, though Walter knew the wounds of 10 years of rejection would not heal overnight. Now, on this particular morning, Walter was headed to Clisha's private office for a meeting she had requested. He found her waiting with Preston and a well-dressed Centaurian male Walter did not recognize. "Walter, this is Kelmore Trenth," Clisha introduced. "He represents the Outer Rim Commercial Consortium. He has a proposal for us." Kelmore stood and extended a hand for shaking, clearly familiar with human customs. "Mr. Hayes, I will be direct. Your business model is unique and successful. Quality products, personal service, employment of marginalized workers who prove to be excellent craftspeople. The consortium wants to franchise this model across 30 stations in 5 sectors. Walter sat down slowly. "Franchise? You want to copy what we are doing?" "Not copy," Kelmore corrected. "Partner with. You would retain partial ownership of each location. You would train local workers in your techniques. You would maintain quality control standards. But we would provide capital, logistics, and market access. Within 2 years, the Theta partnership could be operating on every major station in the Outer Rim." The numbers Kelmore presented were staggering. The potential profits were more money than Walter had ever dreamed of. Enough to make him wealthy. Enough to never worry about credits again. But there were complications. "This would require travel," Walter said. "Constant oversight. Training programs. Quality inspections. Clisha and I would need to visit every location regularly." "Yes," Kelmore agreed. "It would be demanding. But the impact could be significant. Imagine widow workers on every station learning trades, earning credits, gaining respect. Imagine marginalized beings across known space finding opportunity through your model." Walter looked at Clisha. Her antennae were very still, which usually meant she was thinking deeply. "Can we discuss this privately?" Walter asked. "Of course." Kelmore stood. "I will return tomorrow for your answer. This is not a decision to make lightly." After he left, Walter turned to Clisha. "What do you think?" "I think it is frightening," she admitted. "We have built something good here. Something safe. Expansion brings risk. We could fail. We could lose everything." "We could," Walter agreed. "Or we could help a lot of people who need it." Preston clicked softly. "Aunt Clisha, you taught me that taking risks is how we prove traditions wrong. You risked everything partnering with Walter. Look what came from that risk." Clisha's antennae lifted in what might have been amusement. "When did you become so wise, young Preston?" "I learned from the best teachers," he replied. Clisha was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Walter with her compound eyes. "You hesitate. What?" "The opportunity is clearly valuable." Walter struggled to put his feelings into words. "Because this started with us. You and me. 1 credit and 1 act of kindness. If we expand across 30 stations, will we lose that? Will it become just another business corporation instead of something that actually matters?" "It will become what we make it," Clisha said firmly. "If we expand with the same principles we started with, if we treat every worker with dignity and every customer with respect, then it remains what it is. Only larger." "You want to do this?" Walter asked. "I spent 10 years being small and quiet and invisible," Clisha said. "I spent 10 years waiting to fade away. You gave me a chance to be useful again. Now I want to give that same chance to every widow, every outcast, every being told they are worthless. Yes, Walter Hayes. I want to do this. But only if we do it together." Walter felt something settle in his chest. A rightness. "Together," he agreed. "Equal partners like always." They told Kelmore yes the following day. The expansion began immediately. Over the next 3 months, Walter and Clisha traveled to station after station, setting up operations, training workers, establishing the Theta partnership model in new locations. It was exhausting and exhilarating and occasionally terrifying. But everywhere they went, they found widows eager to work. Outcasts grateful for opportunity. Beings who had been told they were useless proving they absolutely were not. The celebration happened on the 6-month anniversary of their first franchise location opening. All 15 original employees gathered in the workshop on Theta 9 for a formal ceremony. Clan elders attended. Preston gave a speech about breaking traditions. Even Vashrek sent a message of congratulations, though he could not quite bring himself to attend in person. Administrator Chin presented them with an official station commendation. "For demonstrating that compassion and commerce are not enemies but allies," she read from the certificate. Then Clisha asked for everyone's attention. She shuffled to the front of the gathering, moving slowly but with dignity. In her limbs she carried something small. "Walter Hayes," she said formally. "You spent your last credit on me when I was freezing and forgotten. That single credit changed both our lives. I want to return something to you now." She opened her hand. In it lay a credit coin. The credit coin. Walter recognized it immediately, the same one he had spent 6 months ago on an emergency blanket. "How did you?" Walter started. "I went back to the Dulverian vendor the next day," Clisha explained. "I traded him 5 credits for this 1 credit coin. I told him it was special. He thought I was crazy, but he made the trade. I've kept it safe ever since." She pressed the coin into Walter's hand. "You spent your last on me. I spent my first new earnings preserving this. So we would both remember where kindness leads." Walter's throat felt tight. He looked at the small coin, worthless in monetary terms, priceless in meaning. "There is one more thing," Clisha said. Preston brought forward the old emergency blanket. The thin, damaged blanket Walter had wrapped around Clisha in the freezing market district. She had kept it all this time. Together, they hung the blanket on the workshop wall. Beneath it, Preston mounted a metal plaque that read, where it began, 1 credit, infinite returns. The gathered crowd clicked and murmured in appreciation. Walter stood next to Clisha, looking at the blanket that represented everything they had built. "Do you regret it?" Clisha asked quietly. "Spending that credit? Choosing kindness over survival?" Walter thought about the question. He thought about freezing in the maintenance tunnels, about having nothing, about the moment he chose to help a stranger instead of himself. "No," he said simply. "It was the best credit I ever spent." "For me also," Clisha agreed. "It bought me a life I thought was over. It bought me purpose and respect and partnership. 1 credit. Everything changed for 1 credit." Around them, the workshop hummed with activity. 15 employees, soon to be dozens more across multiple stations. Widows working. Outcasts thriving. A business built on compassion, proving that kindness was not weakness but strength. Preston approached with a data pad. "Aunt Clisha, Walter, we have 3 new franchise applications. 1 from a Diluvian station, 1 from Human Colony World, and 1 from a Cthrex homeworld settlement." "Cthrex homeworld?" Clisha's antennae shot up in surprise. "They want our model on the homeworld?" "Apparently word has spread," Preston said. "About what you have accomplished. About widows being valued. Some families want to change old traditions. They are asking for your guidance." Clisha looked at Walter. Walter looked back at her. No words were needed. They both knew what this meant. They were not just building a business anymore. They were changing a culture. 1 station at a time. 1 widow at a time. 1 act of kindness that rippled outward in ways neither of them could have predicted. "Tell them yes," Clisha said. "Tell them we will help them build something better." That evening, after everyone had left, Walter stood alone in the quiet workshop. He looked at the blanket hanging on the wall. The plaque beneath it. The credit coin in his pocket. He remembered standing in the freezing market district with nothing to his name. He remembered the choice he had made. Help himself or help a stranger. He had chosen kindness. And kindness had returned to him 1,000-fold. Not because he expected anything in return. Not because he wanted reward. But because some things mattered more than credits or survival or logic. Some things, Walter had learned, were worth everything you had to give. Even if everything you had was just 1 credit and 1 small act of compassion in the cold.